I come to creative interpretation of text in some particular ways. One way is that I assume that a text is the product of an experience. Generally, that's what I assume. Not all texts, but I assume that many texts, especially texts related to spiritual and religious matters, are texts that come out of experiences. And so, to understand the text, it can be helpful to attempt to understand the experience that the text is trying to mediate. And for a prayer like Avinu Malkeinu, I'm not only interested in what the words mean, or I might be interested in the themes of the prayer or the particular language and what that language evokes, but I'm really interested in what is the experience of the person, what might be the experience of a person reading this prayer, and more particularly, since I can't really answer that question, what is my experience of reading this prayer, right? What's going on for me? And I try to be attentive to, does it resonate with me, right? Is there something about it that bothers me, right? Does it go to a place of, what emotions does it evoke? What are the images that come up for me in response to it? What are the memories that come up for me in response to it? And those are the things that I think about in my own creative writing, and also those are the things I try to invite a writing group to go toward, right? Is what is the experience of this text, and how does it come out when it comes out through me, right? If I refract this text through my particular lens, or what does it look like then? Like what face of it do I get then? The other assumption I make about text is that that stories, right, which is really what texts are in a certain way, come out of a well of images, beliefs, archetypes, feelings, journeys that the humans have been on, and that in some ways a text is leading me on a particular journey, and I want to take the journey, and I want to go on the journey that the text is inviting me to take. And one of the ways that I can do that, I can read it, I can pray it, I can meditate on it. One of the things that I can do is I can translate that journey into my own words. Right? That might be by converting a text from the third person to the first person to see what happens. Right? That might be by looking at some crevice in the text, something the text is not saying. Right? How do I understand what the text is not saying? Right? It might be by looking at a character in the text, right, that's peripheral, and saying, well, wait, if I saw the whole thing from the perspective of that character, right, how would this look? So those are some of the techniques that I might use. And particularly with prayer, I might be asking myself very personally, right, what is the journey that prayer wants me to take toward God? Right, and what does God look like, and what do I look like, right, when I take this journey? And when I work with a group, I also want to be really aware that answer is going to be different for every person. Right, that's really the way that we're constructed, is that we're all unique, and although there are themes and patterns that we can all relate to, or that many of us can relate to, what comes out for each person is going to be unique. And to make an environment where that's desirable, right? We're not trying to boil down the response to the text to one response, but actually we want many responses. We want to see it's like a kaleidoscope, right? We want to see the text refracted through many, many lenses. And for me, that's part of how you get at the experience and the feeling and the subtle variety that exists within a text. Part of how you get at that is by letting different creative, in my case, creative writers get at it, right? And when you get all of their different takes on it, when you, for example, when you hear Avinu Malkeinu from the perspective of someone for whom God is El Shaddai, or you hear Avinu Malkeinu from the perspective of someone who is thinking about what does it mean for a prayer to address the Jewish people versus all people, right? Then you're getting another facet of that prayer, and to me that's not only powerful but really essential, because if we think of a prayer as a flat or any other kind of sacred text as a flat text that is only meant to communicate one thing in one way, for me that's not a living text. And I like living texts. I like texts that feel alive and that can have dynamism. And one way to make a text dynamic is to expose it to the creative process.
As I do more of these workshops, I take more seriously Aura's instructions at the beginning, which are, we're not here to put art to the text. We're not here to mimic the text, to parrot the text, to give expression to the text as if the text stands on its own and the art is there to express it. We're there to use art in some way to have an experience which we can then go back and study again and find a new experience in a text that we've already studied. I think what I'll say is, from our group, what we found was that Avinu Malkeinu is a prayer about sin that is mostly not about sin, if you just read each word. It's mostly about, will you do this for us? Will you protect us from this? Will you protect us from that? Will you protect us from the next? Will you protect us from the other? And in our work, we came to understand the sin part of it as being from another time. That was our takeaway, from the past, from another time, not from the present. Could be interpreted that way, but from the past. And it was a fascinating, I'll close with this. It was a fascinating journey to get from reading it and speaking about it and talking about it initially, doing all the exercise, and then coming back and placing it in that context.
One of the largest influences in my life has been actually a term that I first became familiar with through Rabbi Jill's book, Sisters at Sinai, in which in her introduction she described herself as a modern midrashist. And I had never heard that term before at an innocent 23, almost about a decade ago now. And I know that this term is probably commonplace here at such a remarkable institution like AJR, but it's actually not a commonplace term, and it's a term that really shouldn't be taken for granted. But the idea of being a part of a chain of tradition by engaging deeply with the craft and discipline that tradition is actually laid out before. So if you have not read Sisters at Sinai, I highly, highly recommend that you do it. If it's not already required reading at the AJR seminaries, at JTS, where our teachers are very happy to assign their texts, but so I will take it up. You really should. It's a masterpiece. But one of the things that makes it so masterful is that when you read these midrashim that Rabbi Jill constructs on women from the Tanakh, on lesser kind of familiar women to us, she literally picks up on tropes and styles with which ancient midrashim are written, such that when I first read that book and had just prior had begun reading S.Y. Agnon's Present at Sinai, the collection of rabbinic and rabbinic texts on the Revelation experience. By reading those, even in translation, I could already pick up on things, sentence structure, linguistic structure, the way that they would use, like, well, what is the situation likened to? And I would find these things in Rabbi Jill's work. And that in fact, like any artist who learns a particular discipline, whether it's music or painting or movement, and we come to pick up certain tropes from that discipline, not only to recreate the work of our predecessors, of our ancestors, as we will, of our great teachers, but then to develop our own and to offer our own variations. Well, that's how art works. And what Jill really opened up for me in that text, and that I then ended up pursuing later on in my life and throughout and through the present, is the idea of Judaism as an art form. So that when someone like Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel describes, and he says that you should never forget to live your life like a work of art, well, in fact, living your Jewish life, dafka, mamash, of course, I'm not throwing out these words without defining them, but that of course, betach, God, it's happening. It's that JTS moment, gosh. But yes, it's just, it is an art form that we are learning to hone and to individualize, to capitalize on the rich discipline that we've inherited, but then also to make it our own, of course. So how does that then apply to using theater methodology and Avinu Malkeinu? So I really want to jump on Rabbi Hoffman's first question, actually that was the third question about how does the methodology actually help unpack the pshat? Because this is a hard question. We even had just a phone conversation debating about really the understandings, both of our understandings of what pshat versus drash is. What is actually that distinction? And I think many of us are kind of raised on the idea that the pshat is the literal read. And as Rabbi Jeff, I think, really explicated quite well, the idea that it's the historical context, is what it's, and the literary context, right? The literary, we're doing like sort of a literary critical analysis, versus a midrashic response to a text, which is much more about expounding, with story and with mashal, with analogy. What is this thing larger related to? And it reminds me in many ways of a distinction that we have in terms of our mechiltas, which is a midrashic collection, but like the mechilta of Rabbi Yishmael versus the mechilta of Rabbi Akiva. So how do they distinguish between these two rabbinic figures, right? Well, the mechilta to Rabbi Yishmael is credited with this idea that there are 13 principles with which the text is expounded, right? Including Zera Shava, including Kal V'chomer, which I'm not going to define right now. They're not so necessary. But the idea is that there are 13 distinct principles with which we expound a text. And then how is Rabbi Akiva described? Whether you consider this an accolade or it's a criticism, it says that, well, he would drash every et, every vav, right? And so we sort of have this dichotomy of these two different ways to interpret. And the amazing thing that I've found over the years in using theater methodology to unpack both rabbinic texts, Tanakh texts as well, and also liturgy, is that we have the capacity to go over that entire spectrum. We absolutely do. And in looking at Avinu Malkeinu, our group focused on particularly on Sanford Meisner's technique of repetition. And what this ends up bringing up is really both valences. On the one end, in the midrashic sense, taking the words Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, and coming up with the incredible amount of definitions and associations that we have with those terms. There was midrash upon midrash upon midrash that was woven in that experience. Oh, sorry, closer. Better? Oh, great, sorry. It's always better to get close, exactly. Midrash upon midrash upon midrash are expounded. But what's also very powerful is the fact that by focusing on the idea of repetition as a principle, we were actually able to delve into why repetition itself is a tool that's used in prayer. So we focus, for instance, on the word for, to repeat, right? Lishnot. But that it's also related to the word lishanot, to teach. It's also related to the term shinui, to change. And all of a sudden, in actually literally looking at that term, in a pshat sense of that term, that actually there are three valences, that repetition in Judaism is deeply connected to teaching, and that repetition and teaching are deeply connected to the concept of change, of going on a journey, as was described before. And that when you think about a prayer like Avinu Malkeinu that is said a plethora of times throughout the high holiday services, and that even within it, that you're saying Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, that you absorb those terms become a part of you, they become instilled, and they come to teach something new each time. Which is why I opened the text in front of me, that in one time Avinu Malkeinu comes to teach you Chatanu Lefanecha. We've missed the mark in front of you. We've exposed ourselves by missing the mark. And another time it comes to teach Avinu Malkeinu, Kalei Dever V'cherev V'ra'av. Eliminate from us these horrible things, such as a plague or hunger or a destruction. That each time it changes, it does something new. It teaches us something new about the world, about community, and about ourselves. When we do something like the Meisner technique, I had the members of our group do it sort of both in a large group, but also in a traditional pattern where you're with a partner and you're repeating a sort of neutral statement back and forth. And the idea is that the neutral statement is only changed by what you experience from your partner. By applying that kind of repetition and that freedom into a text like this, it actually opens up for us as the individual prayer. Well, what am I responding to? Who is my partner when I repeat this term over and over and over again? So for me, as a theater practitioner, taking a technique that I know, that I use to train actors to take on a text, is actually a technique that I can use to train myself as a prayerful actor when I then come to recite this prayer. I want to end with one really great quote from another great theater practitioner, Augusto Boal, who's credited with creating theater of the oppressed. Augusto Boal says that theater is a rehearsal for life. And I can hardly think of a quote that better describes what prayer is meant to do. That prayer is also a rehearsal for life.
It's clear that art, in terms of music, imagery, nusach, adds dimensions, as Rabbi Jill said, to our prayer. I was interested in knowing if you saw which aspects of this are particularly appropriate to the high holidays.
What I'm always conscious of with the high holidays is that the prayer tradition and the textual traditions are so careful to mark this out as a unique moment in time, right? That the prayers are really different, right, from the way they are the rest of the year, that there's something very unusual about them, and also that there's a tremendous amount of attention to drama, right? That things are done on the high holidays in ways that are very big, that are sometimes very scary, right? Where there's lots of dramatic tension. So I think that in particular makes me think in specific ways about how to work with high holiday texts. You almost can't go over the top with the high holidays. Like it's meant to be as big as you can make it. It's like big dramas about repentance and death and the King of the universe. It's huge. So you almost need to really address it in a very head-on way. And I think that there's a kind of, for me, there's a desire to meet that with as intense as possible an artistic response, because otherwise you're not really getting what they wanted us to get, which is like, this is the time to put it on the table. This is the time not to hold back.
This relates also to the session earlier. When you are creating your own work for something like the high holidays, is there anything in particular that you do to get yourself into that mindset, to that place where you can experience the feelings that will help you to generate that kind of work?
Yeah, it's hard because it's a particular module in time. Many of us have to work on it when we're not in the time, and it's really very difficult. I start humming nusach, like that's how I do it, because like sometimes I have to do that in order to get myself into, okay, so I'm not in late August mode, which is a totally different liturgical and feeling mode from the high holidays. I often get to Rosh Hashanah. I'm like, what is happening? I'm not warmed up to this. Like this is different. Slichot helps with that. There's some things that are meant to warm us up, but yeah, music helps me get into the right mode.
What is it about the high holidays that specifically demand drama, or that specifically demand theater? Which is exactly what Rabbi Jill said, which is that they are high theater. They really are high drama. And part of the reason for that they're high drama, which we would never know because of the way that the high holiday service has occurred now and then the way we know it, is that the service of the Kohen Gadol is the most dramatic moment for the Jewish people, because this person's life literally hangs by a string. whether they do the service correctly or not, in the holiest spot imaginable, they either live or die, and the fate of the people, life or death. And we talk about this in the creation of a play often. It's the idea that the stakes need to be high. Well, you know what? Leviticus nailed it, right? The stakes are high. And the fact of the matter is that for us, at these high holidays, the stakes are high. It's about forgiveness. It's about not only being able to ask for forgiveness, but even the stake of being able to forgive. That in fact, we often again forget this about the high holidays, but Maimonides in Hilchot Tshuva, in the laws of Tshuva, it says that it's not only your obligation to ask for forgiveness, it's your obligation to forgive. Because someone else's fate is in the hands of whether or not you are capable of forgiveness. It's incredibly dramatic. And theater, to me, it's that perfect medium, in fact, where one of the great things that theater really accomplishes, and it's funny because I actually have to talk about this at my internship a lot, is the idea that theater inspires both awe and empathy at the same time. Awe of something so much larger, a story so much larger than you, and then the most personal ability to empathize with another human being. And the high holidays demand that of us, to think of the relationship between Ben Adam LaMakom, between us and the presence, the essence, and also Ben Adam L'Chavero, in the immediate, between us and our neighbor, us and our friend. So that's sort of the theater piece, and I guess the kind of why the high holidays. But then how do I prepare? And this is the whole thing, is that when you are, from a clergy perspective, you are the Kohen Gadol, or Baruch Hashem, you're the Kohenet Geduleh, right? And it's such an experience to put on that kittel. It is such an experience to recite the Hineni. It's such an experience to recite the lines and to be in that moment where you are, taking the blood from the altar, from the sacrifice, and splattering it on the Aron in front of you, and even on the people. I mean, this is really, not only is it drama, it feels like something out of a horror movie, but it's very dramatic. And in order to prepare for that, and this has actually just become something very, very, very recent, is that one, I read through some of the Mishnayot of Yoma, which talks about what the Kohen Gadol goes through. And so in my session, we'll go through that during the week. This is some incredibly dramatic stuff. Another preparation I do is that I read the Hineni prayer to myself a few times, which is all about your own feelings of unworthiness. How can you, as one person, possibly take on this responsibility? That's another big one. But it's very theatrical. This is a monologue. This is a soliloquy, perhaps. A lot of the theatrical techniques that I would use to prepare for a role are not dissimilar from the ones that I would take on to prepare to be a clergy member and a leader of a ritual.
I've actually seen, and I've also led activities within the prayer context where people are doing the actions of the high priest, and particularly, I've had people take rose petals and go into the Aron and throw them at the Aron and sort of do the high priestly offering, and it's actually very powerful. So if you want to know more about that, ask me. The other thing I did was last year with 2 other people, I created a labyrinth walk to take place between Mincha, between the end of Musaf on Yom Kippur and the beginning of Mincha. And we just couldn't get people to go home. It was a very, we basically sang High Holiday Nigunim and had people do this walk with their bodies, their tshuva walk, and it was really, really powerful.
I was in the session on kind of historical tech versions of Avinu Malkeinu, and one of the things I came away with was this idea of how do you engage people in the prayer to get to that place of brokenheartedness.
I'm the principal of a Hebrew school and planning on how to make the high holiday services meaningful. And for the first time, I really had an understanding of the power of repetition rather than the boredom of repetition, and the ability to get the kids interested and inspired by repetition rather than yawning.
I was able to understand why the empathy of the father comes before the judgment of the king. And that's a big part of of praying for forgiveness.
The thing that I came away with is that there are so many more dimensions to prayer than just the words, that each one, and by dimensions I mean they're orthogonal to one another, that each one evokes a different aspect of the prayer, and that together it becomes a much more complete experience.
I want to thank our panelists, Bronwen, Michael, Jill. Thank you so much for your thoughts, for leading us.